Chapter 10a/n. I want to thank everyone that added this story to their favorites and follows, as well as everyone that reviewed this story. Why didn't you save me? I needed you, Naruto. Naruto sat up straight and clutched the injury that her former best friend gave her. It was a dream, she reminded herself. Sasuke never demanded for her help, and he made it very clear to her that she meant nothing to him. He made it clear that she was someone that he could easily discard. She took in several deep breaths and looked at her surroundings. This wasn't her apartment. What the hell happened? The memories of her fight with the villains flooded into her mind, and the blonde-haired girl groaned as she realized that she accepted chakra from the beast inside of her. Didn't she made a promise to herself that it was never happening again? She slapped herself. How the hell could she live a normal life now that she showed everyone the monster inside of her? It is good to see that you are awake, young Uzumaki. Naruto blinked her eyes and looked up to see All Might staring at her with concern. You gave everyone a scare when you fainted, but that was expected since you just took down a lot of villains. All Might, I shouldn't praise you for being reckless, All Might informed her as he took a seat beside her bed. And you are going to get a scolding from Eraserhead as soon as he is healed from his injuries, but you saved everyone. No one is hurt. The superhero shook his head. Everyone is safe and sound, although some of your classmates have some minor injuries. However, their injuries can't compare to the one that you got in your stomach, which begs me to ask, what were you thinking when you decided to continue fighting with a hole in your stomach? There was no one to protect the others, Naruto admitted. And I couldn't let that bastard have the chance to hurt them, so I thought that I can withstand through the pain and continue fighting. The blonde-haired man nodded and looked at her with such old eyes that the blonde wondered if he was trying to stare through her soul. If it wasn't for the fact that she could still feel some pain in her back, she would be squirming under his eyes. She hadn't done anything wrong by deciding to continue to fight. She needed to save her classmates because that was what a hero did. She needed to prove to herself that she was capable of saving people. Uzumaki, do you know how scared your classmates were when they realized that you had an injury to your stomach? Naruto bit her lips and shook her head. Do you know how concerned everyone was to realize that a 15-year-old girl decided that she had no choice but to act like the hero? That the same girl had no concern about her life? Do you stop to think what would everyone's reaction would have been if you died from your wounds? Does it even matter? All Might narrowed his eyes at her words, and the blonde-haired girl gave him a bitter smile. If I died, then there wouldn't be anyone to mourn for me. My mom and dad died on the same day as I was born, and the man that I considered like my grandfather was murdered 2 years ago. It wasn't like she had friends that gave a shit about her. Sakura made it clear that she was useless since she couldn't even bring back Sasuke. The council made it clear that they wanted to exile her for her blunder and blamed her for the injuries that her friends had. It was not like she meant the world to anyone. Maybe Jiraiya would mourn, but he would get back up and act like nothing ever happened. Did you take the time to look at your hospital room? Blinking her eyes, Naruto twisted her head around to look at her hospital room. She hadn't realized it, but her room was filled with flowers. Was that a card? She chewed on her lower lip and took the card from the bedside table. She opened the card, feeling her lips twitch at the bad drawing that Kirishima made of her, and began to read the thank you that were scattered throughout the card. Weren't they scared of her? How could they still look at her? How could they be willing to do this? Why did they write this? You saved their lives, All Might reminded her. If it wasn't for you, then there was no telling about the damage that they would have faced from that monster. You managed to defeat the monster even when Eraserhead could not. You saved your teacher from having an even worse injury, and for that, everyone is thanking you. But aren't they scared? I lost control. The blonde hero did not answer her and stared at her with understanding eyes. What did he understand? Had he ever been called a monster? Had he ever been hated because of the thing inside of him? He could never understand her pain. From their description, you turned terrifying, and they were scared, but they also knew that you were being emotional. Naruto blinked her eyes and the man stared at her. The energy manipulation. It isn't really your quirk, is it? The thing that appeared is your quirk. She bit her lips at her teacher's words. She could lie and tell him that was her quirk. She could continue with the charade, but there was a part of her that knew better. A part of her knew that it would be stupid for her to continue her lie. Those villains knew that she was a kunoichi, and if they were really planning to bring the hero world down, then they would form alliances. She could not take the chance. I don't actually have a quirk, All Might raised his eyebrow and the blonde-haired girl licked her dried lips. I was posing my chakra as a quirk, but if quirks were like Kekai Jinkai, then it won't be considered a quirk since everyone in my part of the world have it. You are from the elemental countries? You're a kunoichi? All Might demanded. Naruto nodded and the man looked at her with pity. Was he pitying her because she came from a world where kids like her were considered adults? Did he pity her because she was a child solider? Or did he know about the shit that she was forced to go through? She ran her hands through her hair and looked out at the window, where there were several birds chirping. I was a kunoichi, but I gave it up when I decided to come here, Naruto admitted, and in the corner of her eye, she swore that she saw several figures hiding behind the door. It must be her imagination. Why did you give it up? Because they were going to exile me for not doing my job properly. All Might frowned at her response and the blonde-haired girl smiled bitterly. I had a mission to rescue my teammate from a man that you would consider a pedophile. My teammate didn't want to come back home and well, I decided to fight him. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to be swept back to that terrible day. Till this day, his hollow eyes haunted her. Had it been her fault for not recognizing the fact that he was going to abandon them? Maybe if she hadn't been so self-centered, then this would not have happened. If she had offered to be his friend earlier, then none of this would have happened. You failed to bring him back. I didn't just fail to bring him back, I nearly died trying to bring my best friend back home and I lost control of the demon inside of me. All Might looked at her with horror and the blonde-haired girl grimaced. The council wasn't happy with me and I overheard them arguing with the village leader about throwing me out of the village, because I can't control it. So you decided to run. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to cry for the first time in years. They weren't the only reason for my decision to leave home. I never belonged there. Do you know, until I was 5 that I never knew what my name was? If it wasn't for the third Hokage, I would have thought that my name was Monster. Her teacher looked at her in horror and the blonde-haired girl swore that she heard a gasp from outside. No one ever cared about the girl that was forced to have the burden of carrying a demon inside of her. Naruto sniffed. Whenever I wanted to make friends with the other kids, the parents would take them away. Do you know what it is like going out of your small apartment and being greeted with such cold eyes? Do you know how scary it can be when it feels like that you don't have the right to live? Young Uzumaki. Do you know why they look at me like that? It is because the fourth Hokage placed the demon that destroyed Konoha inside of me. All Might blinked his eyes and the blonde-haired girl sniffed. I understand why he did it, because there was no other kid born that day, but it wasn't like I asked for this. I just wanted to be loved, and so I thought that by being a kunoichi, they would start to love me or the very least respect me. Why was she telling him this? She should have kept her mouth shut about these things, but All Might didn't look at her with those eyes. He didn't make her feel like a monster. He praised her for her use of the Kyuubi even though everyone in Konoha would have been angry with her. Why could these people be understanding? Why? She blinked her eyes when she felt a pair of muscular arms wrapped around her. The blonde-haired girl sniffed and sobbed, allowing herself to become weak in front of the man that everyone called the best superhero. It had been so long since someone hugged her like this after knowing the truth. The last time she had been hugged was when Jiraiya dropped her off here. Jiraiya had tried to make her happy before she came here. He had taken her to many places in the elemental countries while he helped her find a way to escape from her problems. She never thanked him for that. She never told him that she appreciated him for what he did. She never told him that she was fine. She felt like the worst person in the world. First of all, you are not a monster, All Might informed her. If anything, you are a hero to your village, because if it wasn't for you, then that monster would be causing damage to your village. Second of all, what happened that day was not your fault. If you lost control of the thing inside of you, then it is because you were invested in the mission. Thirdly, it was your village's fault for not seeing the bright girl that you are. She couldn't stop herself from crying another set of tears. Thank you. Naruto didn't know if she was thanking him for seeing her as a person or for telling her that she was a hero to her village. She didn't know if she was thanking him for letting her cry like a baby or if she was thanking him for hugging her and letting her have a breakdown. All she knew was that she was grateful for having the teacher accept her from the very beginning. Did you talk to our student about her actions? Toshinori stared down at the principal, who had a grim look on his face. He couldn't blame him, since Uzumaki would have been dead if it wasn't for the fact that she could regenerate her skin. It had been so reckless of that girl to continue fighting with such a serious wound, but it was her recklessness that saved the other students. Yes, and we might need to change some facts in her file. Nizu raised his eyebrow and the hero bit his lips. Even though it had been an hour since he left the girl, he still felt so angry for what a kid had been forced to go through. She was only 15, but she faced more things than teenagers her age had went through. What facts? Naruto Uzumaki is from the elemental countries. The principal blinked his eyes and stared at him with wide eyes. It would have been funny if it wasn't for the fact that he had to tell his student that she wasn't a monster. What kind of world were they living in? It should be forbidden to make a child feel unsafe in her own home. Though it seemed like if there was a rule then it was ignored since they saw her as a demon. Elemental countries? I should have known from her last name, Nizu commented. Most of the Uzumaki in the country are refugees, but why now? The last set of Uzumaki refugee came 24 years ago. Refugee? He had known that Uzumaki was a common name, but he hadn't known that they were refugee. Did they come from the same place as his student? Did they also have to go through the same things as his young student? It made him want to hurl if that was the case. It was bad enough that she was being abused for something that was not her fault, he informed the humanoid mink. Toshinori clenched his hands into a ball of fist as he recalled the pain of his student's eyes. It is a miracle that the girl hadn't decided to become a villain. The fact that they wanted to exile her for something that wasn't her fault. Exile? What did the child do? All Might grimaced and began to tell the principal of the story that Naruto had told him. He informed the man of all the things that their student had been forced to go through. He hoped that the mink knew what to do to help the girl because God knew that he felt hopeless. He had seen victims of abuse, but not to the scale that the girl had been forced to go through. That is a problem, Nizu muttered. It is a miracle that the girl decided to become a hero with the way those humans treated her. There was some truth behind the man's words. If it had been anyone else, then they would have turned for a life of crime. They would have grown bitter, but that tiny girl just decided to leave. She came to a place where there was uncertainty just to have a better life. He wished that this had not happened to such a young child. I just can't understand how their leader would tell his village people that the girl carried the thing that destroyed their homes, All Might muttered. He was naive. Nizu poured him a cup of tea. He probably thought that by telling them then they would respect the child and care for her. The exact opposite happened instead, and the girl suffered for it. The blonde hero thinned his lips and nodded his head in agreement. Their student suffered because of the actions of her village. The girl was reckless because she thought that no one would care if she died, and that disgusted him. A 15-year-old girl should never experience those things. She should have been enjoying life, should have been smiling and playing with kids that were her age. She should have never doubted her right to live. What can we do to help her? She will need to go and see a therapist to talk about her problems. Toshinori raised his eyebrow, and this earned a sigh. It will be kept hush up, but the girl needs to see someone about what she was forced to endure. We will also need to see if she had any relatives in Japan, but we have the sports festival to see if a family member will communicate with her. Toshinori prayed to God that it would happen because a lonely child like Naruto needed all the family members that she could get. You had us worried sick. Naruto looked up from her book and stared at the door, where her whole class stood with a large teddy bear in front of them. Almost all of them had a relieved look on their faces, as if they were really happy to see her alive. When was the last time a classmate looked at her like that? Sakura had cried and blamed her for Sasuke, not once being relieved that she was alive. Her classmates had tears in their eyes and were carrying such a large teddy bear. I'm sorry. You could have died, Uzumaki, Shoto stated as Tsuyo took a seat beside her. The blonde-haired girl rubbed the back of her neck and avoided her friend's eyes. She knew it had been risky and it had been reckless of her, as her teacher had pointed out earlier. It had been worth it at the time, but the pain in everyone's eyes told her that they wouldn't want to see her get hurt. I'm sorry, Naruto muttered. Todoroki was just stating everyone's worries, Kirishima said. You saved everyone from getting pummeled, but it was scary to know that you were fighting the villains with a hole in your stomach. Why weren't they talking about what she did? Why were they keeping quiet about it? Weren't they going to ask her about what she did? About what she released? She ran her hands through her unbound hair. Usually, people would interrogate about those kind of things, so why weren't they doing it? She flickered her eyes to Midoriya, who had a warm smile on his face, and then to Bakugo, who shot her a scowl. Why aren't you asking me about what I did? Aren't you terrified about what I did? It was scary, Okako admitted. But we also know that you wouldn't have done it if you weren't emotional. It was the first time that we have seen you with so much anger, but it doesn't change the fact that you're our classmate. It was kind of cool how you told them that you would kill them for hurting us, Siro said. We thought that you didn't like us all that much since you don't really try to communicate with us. She did like her classmates, but Naruto was terrified of being close to people. What if they were nothing but a lie? What if she got close to them and they would kill her? What if she got close and they betrayed her? This was her constant fear. It was not like she didn't want to communicate with them, but the memories of her past was too hard for her to shake. I'm sorry for making you think like that. It doesn't really matter, Momo said. What matters is that you are fine now, Uzumaki-san. Thank you. Everyone frowned at her and the blonde-haired girl licked her lips as she formulated the words that would express her feelings. How could she thank them for showing concern for her? How could she ever tell them that their words meant a lot? If it had been anyone else, they would continue to be scared of her. They would try to avoid her, but her classmates were willing to be around her. They didn't mind the fact that she lost control. We should be the ones to thank you, Naruto, Midoriya spoke up. If it wasn't for you, then things would have gotten worse. Most of her classmates nodded their heads in agreement, but Todoroki and Bakugo, her friend, had a thoughtful look on his face as if he was wondering if there were more to her two words. Her blonde-haired classmate had a scowl on his face, but there was no anger in his scowls. If anything, the girl could tell from his twitchiness that her classmate wasn't comfortable. She couldn't blame him because she felt uncomfortable with the amount of visitors that she had. She felt a tightness in her chest as she looked into the smiling faces of her classmates. They were happy to see her alive. They might not have known her for a long time, but they cared for her. They cared enough to visit her for 2 days with gifts. She felt tears burning in her eyes. Oh God, what do we do with a crying girl? Kaminari yelled. Naruto burst out, laughing at her classmates' words while everyone groaned at his words. Perhaps it was really time for her to contact Jiraiya. She needed to resume her training again because she finally found a new reason to grow stronger again. Did Naruto actually give you this letter? She summoned you? How did she look like to you? Gamekaki nodded his head and Jiraiya stared down at the white envelope in his hands. It had been nearly 3 years since his goddaughter last talked to him. Was everything okay? He chewed on the inner corner of his cheek and steadied his hands. It should not terrify him to open a letter from his goddaughter, but there were many things that could be happening to her. Naruto looked a little bit sick, Gamekaki admitted. Then again, she did summon me in the middle of the night while she was in hospital. What? He sent the little girl there just to avoid that situation. If he had known that Naruto was going to just land herself in trouble again, then he would have forced her to come with him in his journey. Still, what did his goddaughter do to land herself in the hospital? The girl could heal from almost any wound, so how did she land herself in this position? He rubbed his forehead. Yeah, Naruto was in a hospital, but it seems like she has a lot of friends, Gamekaki said. You should have seen the amount of flowers that she had in her room and the large teddy bear that they gave her. Flowers? Teddy bears? The petite girl found friends, and not just any friends, but friends that cared for her. Did any of her friends in Konoha gave her flowers? He couldn't remember seeing if anyone took the time to appreciate her. Maybe he had done the right thing for her. She might have been injured, but there were couple of kids that cared for her. Taking a deep breath, Jiraiya opened the letter that Naruto gave Gamekaki. The first thing that stood out to him was the fact that there were several tear stains in the letter and that the girl improved her handwriting skills. Knitting his eyebrows, he began to read the letter that his only godchild sent him. The letter that must have been painful for her to write. He blinked when the first words that Naruto wrote to him was apologizing for not contacting him. It was just like the girl to dedicate a whole paragraph to apologize to him. Did it hurt that she didn't tell him anything? Yes, but Jiraiya understood the state that Minato's daughter had been. As long as she was happy, then he was content with the lack of contact. Jiraiya felt his lips twitched when the blonde-haired girl told him about her last 2 years in that part of the world. Working in a cafe? Why didn't that surprise him? Naruto would never be the type of person that would be content with just studying. He knitted his eyebrows when the girl told him that she decided to become a hero, that she was going to a school dedicated to them. Not just any school apparently, the best school for heroes. She told him about how her middle school teacher pushed for her to continue her education and made a comment about how she would be good in the job. She informed him about the 2 boys from her middle school and how they reminded her of her and that Uchiha teammate of hers. It pained him that even far away from Konoha, the girl was still reminded of the past. He smiled brightly when Naruto informed him that she wanted his help. She wanted him to continue her training and to help her rein in the demon inside of her. He thought that he would never get to hear those words from her, but his goddaughter found life again. She found that fire in her. Now, it was his turn to help her reach her dream. Hi, everyone. Homeroom is about to begin. Can everyone go back to your seats? Naruto felt her lips twitch at the sight of their panicking class president, while Shiro pointed out that Izuku was the only one standing up. For the first time in her life, she missed being in school and seeing everyone. She used to dread the days of waking up early in the morning and seeing her classmates, but her classmates were nothing like her old ones. They weren't scared of her and they visited her for a whole 2 days, giving her more presents than she ever gotten. Morning. Everyone could only blink their eyes and gasp at the sight of the many bandages that were wrapped around his face. From her memory of the battle, their teacher had been wounded, but not to the state that he needed so many bandages. She chewed on her bottom lip as the man wobbled to the platform, where he would begin to tell them about their plans for today. Was he also going to call her out for her actions? All Might did mention that Aizawa-sensei was going to scold her. Are you okay, sensei? Okiko asked. My injuries aren't of any of your concerns, their teacher informed them. However, my concern is that one of my students decided to be a reckless idiot. Uzumaki? What the hell were you thinking when you decided to defeat that monster? Do you think that your life is so easily wasted? You are lucky that you were able to heal from your injuries, because any other person would have been dead. All Might hadn't been kidding when he said that Eraserhead was going to scold her for her actions. She rubbed the back of her neck as all of her classmates turned their head to give her a knowing look. Was everyone going to scold her for her actions? It seemed like everyone wanted to remind her just how lucky she was that she healed from the injuries. Then again, not many people in Konoha scolded her for her actions. It felt nice that he was concerned about her. Sorry. We are going to have a talk about your recklessness during your break, Aizawa-sensei promised. As long as you are a student of this school, I will not approve of any reckless behavior, even if your reckless behavior saved everyone's life. Did they really think that she hadn't learned her lesson? Naruto couldn't help but ask herself as their teacher turned his attention to her other classmates. Yes, it had been reckless of her, but she thought that no one would care if she died. How was she supposed to know that they cared for her? It wasn't like she had people lining up to care for her. It wasn't like she had the experience of being cared for. Oh God, it sounded depressing even for her. Now that I have got that out of the way, let us talk about your next fight. There. Teacher declared, earning furrowed eyebrows from everyone. Slowly their furrowed eyebrows disappeared and smiles appeared on their faces, which made Naruto wonder if she was the only one confused. How could they figure out what he was talking about? She didn't understand what the hell was going on. The U.Sport Festival is happening in 2 weeks, Aizawa informed them, which earned crazed cheers from her classmates. Why were they excited? Wasn't it like any other sport festival? Naruto asked herself as her classmates whispered excitedly to each other. It was something ordinary, right? So why were they acting like it was the greatest thing in the world? She glanced at Todoroki, who had a thoughtful look on his face, and then to Momo, who seemed excited. Would it be stupid of her to say that she didn't know why it was such a big deal? Why is everyone excited about it? Naru-chan, haven't you seen the U.Sport Festival? Tsuyu asked. The blue-eyed girl shook her head. I have no time to watch television. The sport festival is one of the biggest events in Japan, Aizawa-sensei explained to her. Once upon a time, the world used to go crazy over the Olympics, but this is no longer the case in Japan. Our U.Sports Festival has taken the place of the Olympics for Japan. Was it also broadcasted in other countries? Was there a possibility that it might appear in her village? She never had cable in her apartment in Konoha since she could never afford it. Companies always charged her high rates, so it seemed stupid of her to try and get one. She had been lucky just to get television, even if the shows in Konoha had been boring as hell. Honestly, who the hell wanted to see a boring romantic movie about the first Hokage and his wife? Till this day, she never understood how her female classmates found it romantic. Naturally you will gain valuable experience and popularity if you are picked up by a famous hero, Aizawa-sensei informed them, snapping her from her train of thought. However, you have a limited amount of time to show those heroes your determination and your abilities. You should try hard not to mess things up since this only happens once a year. Naruto felt her lips twitching upwards as everyone gave their teacher a determined look. If you are serious about becoming a hero, then this is an event that you can't miss. It seemed like she should take this seriously then. Aizawa had the urge to rip something apart as he stared at his most reckless student, who had her head down and her hands nearly folded on her lap. Until recently, he thought Midoriya and Bakugo were the most reckless students in his class, but Uzumaki proved him wrong. The girl was a reckless fool. He did know from Toshinori that the girl had been mentally abused by the people in her village, and he knew that she was a child solider, but it should not be to this level. Uzumaki, do you know why I told you that we needed to talk about your recklessness? Because I could have died. She answered softly. I didn't know that anyone cared about me until All Might told me. He nodded and stared at the blonde girl, who curled her hands into a tight fist. He should scold her even more for the reckless behavior, but it was obvious from her tense shoulders that she was apologetic. Was her behavior truly because she thought no one would care about her death? Had no one in her home told her that she was important? It made him want to hurl. That is not the only reason that I wanted to talk to you about your recklessness. She blinked her eyes and Aizawa rubbed his neck. Your recklessness and your history had made everyone decided that you need to go and see a therapist. Why do I need to go to therapy? I'm fine. If you were mentally stable then we wouldn't be in this situation, he informed her. You had already given hints to All Might that you have no regard to your life, but it became clear in that fight with the monster. The fact that you told him that the treatment you face told us that you need to talk to someone because you can't live like this. Aizawa-sensei, not only are you a child solider, but you are also a young girl that was abused by the people who should have cared for you. The girl gulped and he looked right into her blue eyes. Listen to me, Naruto, you have nothing to be ashamed about. There are many children out there that have been abused, but when we find a case like this, we take them to therapy. Why? Because you won't ever properly recover from your experience, he informed her. I don't know about your village way of dealing with kids like you, but we want you to recover. We want to see you reach your full potential, and you will never reach your full potential if you are reckless. You can never be a great hero if you bottle your feelings up. If you want to heal from your emotional scars, then you need to start talking and start letting people in. I am fine. Then why did you look like you want to break down? Aizawa asked himself as the girl repeated those words to herself. Who was the girl trying to fool? Did she really believe that she was fine? Any person would have gone batshit crazy if they experienced the things that she had. No one could ever repress the pain of being rejected, especially not for something that they never asked for. Naruto, you know that it is okay to cry, right? The girl opened her mouth to protest, but he was not having it today. No one will judge you if you want to continue to cry your heart out because what you went through wasn't easy. It wasn't fair for you to be burdened with such a huge responsibility, and no one will blame you if you want to curse them or get angry with them. You are only human, you understand me? It isn't wrong for you to show emotions. It was my emotions that got me into this mess, the girl admitted. The monster can gain a little bit of control when I am emotional, especially when I am angry. Do you really think bottling up your feelings will fix the issue? She shook her head and Aizawa sighed as he realized that it would not be difficult to talk to her about this topic. If you know that bottling up your emotions won't work, then you need to figure out another solution. I won't ever use that monster's powers. There will be a day when you need to use it, he informed her. You can try and try, but there will be a day when your physical powers won't be enough to save the people that you care about. You need to confront the monster, and you need to figure out a way that you don't lose control. It is one of the reasons why we think that you need to go to therapy besides the abuse you went through. Sensei, just go to one session, and if you think that it is pointless, then we will stop and find you another therapist. Naruto opened her mouth to protest and he narrowed his eyes at her. Uzumaki, we won't let this issue rest because we want you to get better and we want you to live a life filled with no regrets. The girl sucked in her cheeks but did not protest at his words. They could not afford to fail this young girl. Uzumaki was acting strange, Shoto thought to himself as his classmate shoved her books into her bag as if they were the worst thing in the world. She had been acting almost like a zombie since her talk with Aizawa. She barely answered everyone and there was a faraway look in her eyes. It was almost like she was in another place and another time. It was a good thing that their other classmates hadn't noticed it or else they would be pestering her about it. Uzumaki, are you okay? The blonde-haired girl stopped shoving her books and turned her head to look at him. The conflicting emotions in his friend's eyes told him that the girl was at war with herself and he wondered what did their teacher said to her when it came to her recklessness. It was not like Uzumaki to feel so frustrated with them. I'm fine, Todoroki, Uzumaki answered. Shoto thinned his lips at her response. He might not be the best person when it came to emotions but he could tell that she wasn't fine. If Uzumaki was fine then she wouldn't act so jumpy, which made him question about what exactly did Izuku tell her. He glanced at his other classmates, noticing how Tsuyu was eyeing Naruto with concern. It seemed like he wasn't the only one to notice her strange behavior. Uzumaki, you know if something is bothering you then you can talk to someone about it, Shoto informed her. You know that the whole class won't have any problems with listening to you about your problems. You are not alone, Uzumaki. His classmate could only stare at him as she tried to process what he just said to her. He didn't know what happened to Uzumaki and he could only guess the level of abuse that she had, but Todoroki wanted her to know that she did have the class. Everyone decided to come with him because she was their classmate. She might not know it but she was like their rock, since she took action when all the other heroes were injured. Thank you. Shoto felt a tight feeling in his chest as Naruto directed a small smile in his way. With the way her eyes were closed and the smile playing on her lips, he could say that the girl was calm and relaxed. If someone was to ask him how to describe the girl's smile then he could only say that it was like having the sun shining down on you. That smile on Uzumaki's face made her beautiful. He blinked his eyes when the girl flushed a light red and he wondered what was making the girl look like a tomato. Todoroki tilted his head when he noticed that several of the boys were giving him a smooth look while the girls could only giggle. What was happening? Did something happen that he didn't know about? So, Todoroki thinks Uzumaki is beautiful, Kaminari said, giving them a teasing smile. Did he just say his thoughts out loud? From the way that Uzumaki was flushing an even brighter red told him that he said his thoughts out loud. He could only blink his eyes as the blonde-haired girl put her hands on her face as if she was trying to cover her whole face up. Was Uzumaki shy? She did know that she was pretty, right? He was just joking. Sparky, Naruto muttered, placing her bag over her shoulder. I'm not what he claims me to be. But I'm not joking, Todoroki said, knitting his eyebrows together. You are very pretty. The blonde-haired girl could only gap at him before turning an even brighter red. Briefly, he wondered how red could his classmate turn because her face was turning redder than a tomato. Also, why did Uzumaki think he was joking? Didn't she know that she was pretty? He stared at the blonde-haired girl, who stood up from her seat. The blonde-haired girl groaned. What the hell is going on? Naruto said, putting her hand on her hips. You can't tell, Whiskers? They are scoping out the competition, Bakuga said, standing beside her. Since we are the kids who survived the villain attack and you are the girl that defeated them, it only makes sense that they want a look before the sports festival. Uzumaki sighed. Well, can they move the fuck out of the way? I got a part-time job to go to and I can't afford to be late. It is bad enough that I missed 2 whole days of work because of those stupid villains. So you are the girl that defeated them? You don't look like much. The boy scoffed but Uzumaki did not rise to his bait. Are all the kids in the hero course like this one? Because I'm a little disillusioned if this is what you are offering. Those of us who didn't make the hero course are stuck in general studies and the other tracks. Did you know that? Do you know how many of us want your position? Uzumaki shrugged her head. No, but if you want me to pity you then go somewhere else. The students of the hero course worked their asses to get here. It is not our fault that you didn't try to find ways to overcome the weakness of your quirks. Arrogant, the boy muttered. You know that depending on the results of this sports festival that they might consider transferring us to the hero course, and I understand that the reverse is also possible for you. So, scoping out the competition? For a general studies kid like me, this will be the perfect chance to knock you off your high horse. You can consider this a declaration of war. Uzumaki curled her lips into a smirk. Then consider your declaration of war accepted, ferret. Now move and let me go to my job because unlike you lucky bastards, I have other things to worry about instead of the sports festival. With those words his classmate disappeared, leaving their other classmates to gap at her behavior. A week later, shouldn't you be preparing for the sports festival, Naruto? You know I won't mind if you decided to take the whole week off. Naruto curled her lips into a thin smile as her boss frowned at her. For the past week, her boss had been giving her very subtle hints about what should be her priority. If she was not cleaning the dishes, then the woman would comment about it while she was serving the customers. Even when she was changing into her normal clothes, the woman would comment about it. I got it under control. Her boss raised her eyebrow. Naruto, do I need to remind you that everyone is going to be watching you and seeing your stuff, or that my cafe is on the line here? The blonde-haired girl swirled her head at her boss' words. What did she mean that the cafe was on the line here? What did she mean that her only safe haven was on the line? Naruto took several deep breaths as she tried to rein in the storm of emotions that threatened to consume her. She must not release her temper on her boss because Naruto was no Sakura. Boss, what did you do? The middle-aged woman laughed nervously and fiddled with her hands as she avoided looking into her eyes. The fact that her boss was acting like a little girl, who had her hand in the cookie jar, worried the teenager. In the 2 years that Naruto worked under the woman, not once had she seen the woman act like this. Confident and bubbly, yes, but not nervous. I might have made a bet with one of my poker buddies about you. I thought you said that you will stop using the cafe as a gambling chip. The woman rubbed the back of her neck. He was betting a lot of yen since he heard from one of his customers that one of the hero's kids was in the sport festival, and well, I couldn't resist. You know I am weak when it comes to money. So, you bet the cafe that your deceased husband billed for you because you wanted some extra cash. Now you are making me sound like a bitch. The woman grumbled. You should be happy that I have confidence in you. The girl could gape at her boss' childish words and wondered not for the first time if her boss was really as old as she claimed to be. How could someone bet their own workplace? Their heaven? The woman always reminiscent about how her husband worked so hard to build this place for her. She always went into a daze as she talked with a lovesick sigh about how the man had been willing to accomplish her wish. She never thought that the woman would make such a risky gamble. Her boss loved her deceased husband to the point that Naruto wanted to barf about the stories between them. The stories about them were the kind of stories that made a person queasy and almost made you believe that true love exists. This just proved to Naruto that there was no such thing as true love. The next day, I'm not joking. Naruto felt her face heating up as she recalled Todoroki's words from last week. It had been a whole week since the boy accidentally informed everyone that she looked beautiful with a smile on her face. It had been a week and she still could not look at the boy in the eye. Was this how Hinata felt whenever she looked at Kiba? She felt like an idiot for teasing the girl about her crush. She rubbed the back of her neck and twisted her head away as Shoto furrowed his eyebrows at her. Why was she embarrassed? It was normal for a friend to compliment their friend, right? It should not make her feel like an idiot. Yet, her stomach had a pit of butterflies as she recalled the honesty in his eyes when he told her that she was pretty. No one really called her pretty. Uzumaki, did my words from last week make you feel uncomfortable? Shoto asked her as everyone waited for Aizawa to enter the classroom. The younger boy had a small frown in his face and the blonde felt a sense of dread as the butterflies came back. I was only telling the truth about your appearance. I didn't mean for my words to upset you or to cause you to avoid me. Was he serious when he said that he never had fangirls? Naruto asked herself as she willed for her blush to go away. How could no one stalk him? He was polite, kind, and good-looking to bit, and he actually knew how to compliment people. He also had the naive thing going for him. There was no way in hell that he didn't have any fangirls. Your words didn't upset me, she finally said when she felt the heat in her face died away. It just took me by surprise. Shoto frowned at her but did not dare to question her about why it took her by surprise. It was not like she could tell him that no one called her pretty. Everyone used to comment about how she acted like a boy or about the way that she ate. The girls would make fun of the whisker marks in her cheek, telling her that no one would think that a girl like her was pretty. She curled her hands into a tight ball of fist as the memories of the past washed over her. Monster. Loveless. Ugly. Those were all the words that the girls had used to describe her. This had been their bullets whenever she made fun of their love of Suzuki. They would taunt those words as they reminded her that there was very little chance of someone loving her. She shoved those memories away and stared at the whiteboard. Love was not something that she should be striving for. Naruto was going to become a hero. She was going to show the world that Naruto Uzumaki was not some girl that allowed her past to consume her. She was going to prove to the council that they had been fools for considering exiling her. Uzumaki-san. Naruto blinked her eyes and turned her head to look at Momo. The vice president was a very pretty girl with her onyx-colored eyes and long black hair. Sometimes when she looked at the girl, she wondered if this was what Sasuke would have looked like if he had been born a girl. However, her classmate was no Uchiha. Despite her limited interaction with her, the girl had shown that she was a warm person. Naruto. Her classmate frowned and the blonde smiled tightly. I don't actually like being called by my last name. Can I call you Naruchan? Naruchan? Was it going to become a habit for everyone to call her by that nickname? It started with Itsuka and then Tsuyo had decided to call her that after USJ. Now it was Momo's turn to ask. Until she came to this part of the world, Hinata had been the only one that called her by that nickname. Sakura had refused to call her by that nickname and Sasuke would rather die than call her by that name. I don't mind, Momo-chan. Naru-chan, will you like to sit with Jiro and me? The blonde-haired girl tilted her head and Momo smiled. We would like to get to know you better. The blue-eyed girl chewed on her bottom lip as her brain processed what her classmate asked of her. Sit with them during their lunch? Was she ready for such a big step? It was true that she knew now that they cared for her, but it still felt too soon for her. She felt her head throb as the memories of her childhood flooded through her mind. As a little girl, she wanted so badly to have friends and she did a lot of stupid things in the hopes of making friends. She tried studying like crazy, only to realize that most of the teachers gave her papers that were not her level. She skipped class with the boys because she thought that they might be the only ones that were willing to be friends with her. She hadn't done anything and these girls wanted to get to know her. I will be happy to sit with you guys. Lunchtime, so Uzumaki. Naruto. The blonde-haired girl could only curl her lips into a large smile as her classmate knitted her eyebrows together. It was starting to become an annoying habit for her to correct everyone when they called her by her last name. If only she had told everyone from the very beginning that she hated being called by her last name. Todoroki and Itza were different since the two of them did not feel comfortable enough to call her by her first name. How come you don't spend a lot of time with Bakugo or Midoriya? Jiro asked her. The three of you came from the same middle school, but the two of them don't seem to know you all that well. Naruto thinned her lips before swirling the contents of her ramen. So that was their first question? She mused to herself as she stared at the ripples in her food. It was kind of logical. The two boys should know her very well, but she never allowed herself to bond with any of the kids in her middle school. It was true that she protected Izuku, but she did not actually know him all that well. She hated Bakugo's guts. I never had time to bond with the kids in my middle school, she admitted. I was always too busy studying or working to even consider hanging out with any of them. The only interaction that I have with any of my classmates were when we had group work or when I had to rescue Midoriya from Bakugo. So you never went out with your friends? If you asked Explosive Head, then he will tell you that I didn't have any friends. They frowned at her response, but the girl could only shrug her shoulders. She ignored the voices from the other students and looked at her two classmates. I used to try and make friends with the other girls in my elementary school, but it didn't work out for me. Momo frowned. Why? Because they thought I was competition for their crush, Naruto admitted. There was a boy in my elementary school that was thought to be the cutest boy in our whole school. The other girls would try to stalk him and declare their love for him while I just insulted him because he had everyone's attention. I never understood why they thought that he was good-looking since he had the personality of an ass. Her classmates blinked their eyes like an owl as they processed her words. So she was not the only one that found their behavior weird? Almost all the girls in the academy had called her a liar for not thinking of her teammate in that way. Only Hinata hadn't found it weird, but the girl had a crush on Kiba, which was smarter since the boy was nice. So, they didn't become friends with you because they thought that you were trying to get their crush attention by insulting him. Jiro summarized. Naruto nodded, and that earned chuckles from her two classmates. The joyous laughter of the girls brought a lightness to her heart, and it made her wonder if maybe that it was possible for her to be friends with other girls. Itsuka might be her friend, but she did not get to see her often. Being the class president meant that her friend had a lot of duties and could not always afford to spend time with her. It also did not help that her classmates had a stupid feud with them, or so Itsuka informed her. The poor guy, Momo muttered. If they were stalking him then he must have never had a moment of peace. Naruto laughed. It was so bad that he begged me to save him from those girls so he could eat his lunch in peace. I told him that there was no way in hell that I was willing to risk my life to protect him from those girls. Do you know how crazy they were? 2 girls broke their friendship over him. You are kidding? They wouldn't be so stupid as to break their friendship over some guy that didn't even like them. The smile on Naruto's face faded as she recalled the day when she entered the classroom and saw that the 2 girls were sitting in the opposite sides of the room. Even as a little kid, she thought that the whole thing was stupid and pointless. The 2 of them had something that she only longed to have. They had a bond that she tried to foster with them but denied her. They threw that bond over a boy. They were, Naruto answered. I don't even know what the big deal was, but I just knew from that day on, their friendship was never the same. I know you guys were kids, but you can't throw your friendship over a boy, Momo said, putting down her chopsticks. Friendship is for life, but crushes come and go. They should have focused more on their education and their plans for their future. If my mother heard me do what they did, then she would have given me a huge scolding. Did I mention one of them had the highest grades when it came to the books? Jiro snorted. What is the point of having the highest grades when you are not focused in the more important things in life? Throwing away a friendship for a boy is just wrong in so many levels. The girl tilted her head and listened as her 2 classmates debate about the issue. So she was not stupid to think that they were wrong? Sakura had called her an idiot and told her that she would understand if she fall in love with someone. Till now, the girl still thought that it was stupid because no boy should be worth it. When there had been rumors about Kiba liking her, Naruto made it a point to tell Hinata that she didn't like dog breath. She made it clear that their friendship meant more to her. The girl dropped her chopsticks as she realized the irony behind her words. If their friendship meant the world to her, then why did she run? Why didn't she tell Hinata that she was leaving? The girl deserved to know the truth. The pain of her fight with Sasuke didn't mean that her friend didn't deserve to know that she was fine. It didn't mean that she should have severed ties with her. She should have told the girl that she was leaving the village, but Naruto knew that Hinata would have told her that she was coming with her. Naruto might have had no one in the village, but the girl still had a little sister that loved and worshipped the ground that she walked on. It was too late for her to tell her that she left the village or how much their friendship meant to her. She really was a bad person. So this was the school that Naruto was going to? Jiraiya mused to himself as he stared at the looming gates over him. He had spent a whole week trying to find the exact location of the train that stopped between the 2 continents. It had been difficult to locate the train with the way that the train did not really have a schedule that he could follow. It had been just his luck that the train had stopped in the remains of Uzushiagakur. It had been an adventure getting to know the people that were going to Japan. Several of them had been civilians that were looking for a better life for their families, while some of them had been refugees from Kirigakure, who wanted nothing to do with ninjas. Their behavior reminded him of his young charge, and it had been difficult for them to open up to him, but he got there in the end. Now it was his time to explore the country that he only heard stories about and only seen in television. He jumped as the gates swung open and several teenagers walked out of the gates. For a brief moment, his mind went frozen as he tried to process the girl's uniform. The perverted part of him was tempted to try and hit on them, while the part of him that was Naruto's godfather felt a sense of dread. If he was being tempted by a pair of short skirts, then he would hate to wonder the kind of perverts that Naruto was facing. His goddaughter might be able to break several bare limbs with her bare hand. But it was worrying about how short their skirts were. "See you, Naruchan," a girl called out. Jiraiya stood up straight when he heard the word Naruchan. His heart raced as a blonde-haired girl walked out of the gates with a small smile playing on her lips. Was that really Naruto? The last time he saw the girl, she was tiny thing with eyes that were faded to nothing. The last time he saw her, she barely had the body of a woman. The teen in front of him might have her father's colors, but it felt like he was looking at a mini Kushina, except for the fact that she was even prettier than her mother. His stomach fell as he realized that there must be a possibility that there were several boys interested in her. Why couldn't the girl be ugly? Now all of his jokes about fending her from perverts were going to be true. Arosenin. The Sunin opened his mouth to scold her for her nickname, but closed it when the girl launched herself at him. He could not scold her for that horrible nickname. It would be just too cruel for him to yell at her when they hadn't seen each other in nearly 3 years. He rubbed her back as the girl sobbed against his chest, telling him about how sorry she was for not contacting him. He should be the one apologizing because he failed in his duties as a godfather. Uzumaki, who is this? Jiraiya frowned when he saw a beculured boy staring at them with curiosity. He flickered his eyes to his goddaughter, who released him from her hug and twisted her body around to look at the boy. The boy was a good-looking boy, that much he could not deny. In fact, it almost pained him to say that the kid might be one of the best-looking boys that he had ever seen. He was a lot more good-looking than that Uchiha teammate that Naruto had, and he would have been even more good-looking if he didn't have that burnt mark. This is he. I'm Naruto's godfather, and who might you be, young man? The beculured boy arched his eyebrow while his goddaughter could only gape at him. He folded his arms against his chest and stared at the punk's eyes. This boy gave him a bad feeling. Not the same bad feeling as the Uchiha. If that was the case, then everything would be fine. What the hell are you doing, Ero-sennin? Naruto grumbled. Todoroki is my classmate. If he was just her classmate, then why the hell was the girl blushing like a little girl? In Konoha, the girl denied having any romantic feelings when it came to her teammate. She never blushed or anything. In the few minutes that he saw them interact, the girl was blushing as red as her mother used to when it came to her father. It was his right to be concerned. If you are her godfather, then why did you abandon her? Why didn't you visit her when she was in the hospital? Oh God! Naruto muttered, hiding her face behind her hands. Jiraiya curled his lips and stared at the rigid boy. His first impression of the boy was that he was a block of ice that did not care about anyone. The fact that the boy had the audacity to question him and his relationship with Naruto told him that he did care. The kid was a lot better than most of the kids in Konoha, who did not seem to even ask him about why he hadn't visited Naruto on time. Then again, he never told anyone about the truth of their relationship. Because it took the brat nearly 3 years to even tell me that she was fine. Naruto smiled sheepishly and he ruffled her hair. She blinked and he could only give her a smile, hoping that it would be enough for her to be reassured that they were fine, that he was not really mad about the lack of contact. And I have business all over the world since I am a famous writer. It was not like he was lying. His books were still famous in this part of the world since the big business owner had contacted his publisher to demand the books were published in Japan. They did tell the business owner that he had to alter a few things in the book. The only alteration in the books was where he was born and where he lived, but other than those small changes, the book was the same as the ones that he sold in their part of the world. Now can I ask, what are your intentions to my goddaughter, Ero-sennin? He was Chapter 10a/n. I want to thank everyone that added this story.